Good evening. Welcome to Star Talk. I'm Ken Eccles, and we're happy to have you with us on the program tonight. I'm happy to be on the program tonight. We had a whole host of technical issues last week, um, and we don't need to run through the entire list and litany of the technical issues. We had really a mess last week, but we're here tonight, so there. Phone line is open. The numbers on your screen that you can call us on the phone. You can also email us. Email address ought to be up there, and it most likely is. But if it's not, the email address is kechols47 at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you either by phone or by email on this edition of Star Talk. We have a few emails. Um, we have several from last week, all of which revolve around a common theme. And the common theme is represented by this email that says, "Why in the heck," we'll say, "why in the heck are you not on in a live show again tonight? It's been like this all week long." And then there are a few more emails that kind of follow that same pattern of inquiry. So we don't need to read them all. I will just repeat what I told you already. Technology failed us repeatedly last week. I have a a situation here too. Technology failed us repeatedly last week, and that's why the heck that every show last week was a rerun. But this is a real one. We have to kind of get used to this again. We have to start all over, having a live show and become accustomed to it. The fact that you can actually call right now and get on the air at that phone number, or you can send along your email to kechols47 at gmail.com. Here's a slightly more current email which says, but it's kind of in the same ballpark as the others. Uh, Listen to this, Ken. Good? How come you can't get good internet? If you had good internet, then you wouldn't have then you wouldn't have bad. If you had good internet, you wouldn't have bad internet, and then you would have your show on the air all the time instead of just every now and then like it's been this week? Well, the only answer I know to that is I have the internet that is available to me, and that's pretty much the internet that we're going to go with. And it wasn't actually it wasn't really, exclusively the fault of the internet last week. We've had, and if you live anywhere near me, or in some cases, if you don't live near me, you know that there have been workers going up and down the streets of Eden for the past several months, replacing utility poles and replacing transformers and replacing utility lines and doing all sorts of work on the electric grid. And two nights last week, I lost power late in the day, uh, presumably presumably because of that work that was going on. So it wasn't just the internet last week. Uh, it was progress being made in getting us new utility poles and wires. Um, but if you're going to have electricity in your society, and I think we have all agreed, at least tacitly agreed, not everybody has spoken up and said it, but I think we're all generally in agreement that we do want electricity in our society. So if you're going to have that, every now and then, um, something ugly might happen. So enough of that. Phone line is open right now. If you'd like to give us a call at that number on your screen or send us an email at kechols47 at gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you either way on this edition of Star Talk. Strange thing happening with my phone here. I'm going to look at my other phone because that phone's doing weird stuff. Maybe this one will do better. Maybe. Yeah, here's an email that says, Ken, I have a question, and I hope that you will know the answer. And if you don't, I hope that maybe you can find out the answer. Who owns the Gulf of Who owns the Gulf of Mexico? Google. Doesn't Google own the Gulf of Mexico? They own pretty much everything, don't they? No, emailer. Nobody actually owns the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico mostly is international water. Now, of course, the United States claims a 2-mile territorial extension into any body of international water. So we own the 2 miles of the Gulf of Mexico that is closest to our shores. And I guess Mexico probably does the same thing. But aside from that, the Gulf of Mexico in its expanse, and most of it is international water, and it's not owned by anybody. Not even Google owns the Gulf of Mexico, at least not yet. Although I would never bet against Google getting ownership of anything at some point in the future. This one says, I hope you are on today, Ken. I am. Hope you're on today, Ken. I will miss the show, but please ask Charles to put all the parades on the streaming app and on YouTube as well, if possible. I haven't seen any of the parades yet, and I want to see them and your commentary and Mr. Draper's boat. Okay, I will suggest, pardon me, please. I'm not a well man. I will suggest that Charles put the parades on everything we got, on all the streaming stuff and on YouTube and everywhere. And indeed, that might be the case that they're on everywhere. But if they're not, I will use and I have, of course, I have enormous influence in the company, and pretty much what I say goes for the most part. So I'll certainly try to make that happen. Unfortunately, Mr. Draper's, I think Mr. Draper's boat has only made it to one parade, the Draper Children's Parade. He didn't make it to the Reidsville Parade, and he didn't make it to the Old Leaksville Parade, but I'm pretty sure he made it to the Draper Children's Parade. So I'm sorry you haven't seen any of the parades. They've been good parades. But certainly, I think Charles is going to provide plenty of opportunities for folks who did not see the parades the first time around to see them as the season continues on Star News. So just keep a sharp eye, and they probably will turn up. Let me do a test phone. Is the phone working? I'm going to do a phone test here. Yeah, the phone's working. All we need is somebody to call. The number on your screen there is the number you can call, and you can also email us at kechols47@gmail.com. Perhaps people have gotten out of the habit of calling over this past week, and I wouldn't be surprised if that had happened. Not out of the habit of emailing, though. This is Ken. I watched the oh, wait a minute. Hold on. This is breaking news from Mr. Draper. Mr. Draper says, no parade for me. Well, that's a shame because Mr. Draper has sent me a picture of the boat entirely in blue lights, and it looks good. But apparently, if I understand this correctly, Mr. Draper was not able to get into any of the parades this year. So, well, that's too bad, because that boat looks really, really good. Hey, that would have been a nice thing to see in the parade. But I guess it didn't happen. Unfortunate. All right, let's see. The other emailers said, Ken, I watched the Old Leaksville Parade, on TV. I didn't get there in person because it was a little bit cold that night. Yeah, it was a little bit cold that night. Didn't get there in person, but it looked to me like they have quit throwing candy out at the parade. I didn't see any of that happen on TV. Uh, and I agree with whoever made that decision not to throw the candy out anymore, because that was not a good thing, as it was dangerous uh, for the kids to run out into the street and try to get the candy. So I hope I'm right that they didn't throw any candy. And if I am right, then good for whoever made that decision. You are right, emailer. They didn't throw out any candy at the Old Leesville Parade this time for the very reason that you mentioned. So that was the case. Here's news from Star News. All parades covered. I believe we have covered every local parade in the viewing area, and they are available right now on Facebook for on-demand viewing. So there you go. Every parade, and as it says, I don't think we missed any. They are all available for viewing on Facebook right now. So there you go. Here's another picture of Mr. Draper. This is an even better picture than the other one. I wish I could show you this, but I don't have the technology to do so. Um, wow, that looks good. And it's a shame that didn't get into any of the parades. Ken, I was at the Old Leaksville Parade, and I didn't even exactly see where Star News was. It looked like there was just a little table sitting out there. Last time you had a big thing with lights all over it, and some other stuff. But how come you only brought that one little table this time? Uh, well, we did have really just one little table this time, and Charles with a handheld camera is what we had. I don't know. We have equipment scattered all over the place during parade season, and I guess that on the night of the parade, that I guess was all that was available. But it did the job. This day and time in television, with the kind of equipment we have now, you have very small, insignificant looking things can produce very, very good video and audio these days. So no, you didn't see a whole lot of big stuff there, but the video looked really good. And I dare say that in the future you'll probably be seeing less and less really big things at parades, and then a lot more small hand carried things because they're making stuff better and smaller these days. And that's kind of the way of the world, better and smaller. Well, at least smaller, not better in every case, but pretty consistently making things smaller as we go along. One more question here about the Old Leaksville Parade. Ken, it looked like it was snowing at the Old Leaksville Parade, and I thought it was snowing until some of it started falling close to me, and I saw that it was fake. But from a distance, it looked pretty good. It looked actually a whole lot like snow. Where was that even coming from? I couldn't figure out who was doing it. Well, emailer, I never figured out who was doing it either. I don't know where it was coming from. I, like you, saw it, and I agree with you. It did. It looked almost like real snow, as long as you didn't get too close to it. Once you had it in your hand, you realized it wasn't actually real snow, but it looked pretty good. I don't know where that was coming from. I honestly, I don't know. Whoever did it, they did it cleverly enough that it was not obvious who was putting the snow out or where they were putting it out from. But yeah, it did look good. You couldn't make a snowball with it, unfortunately, because we would have made some snowballs and thrown them primarily at Charles if we could have made some. But unfortunately, you couldn't do that. Couldn't make a snowball or a snowman or execute any snow angels. It wasn't good for that. But it did look good falling down. I have to say, it looked pretty good as it fell down. Let's see. Ken, were you on vacation last week? Where did you go to the North Pole to see Santa Claus? No, I wasn't on vacation. Again, we had technical issues last week. We apologize for that. Now, this email says your phone goes straight to voicemail. Well, that's not good. Why would my phone be going straight to voicemail? So somebody's trying to call and the phone is going straight to voicemail. Can I, as I actually sit here and do what I'm doing, figure out why the phone is going straight to voicemail? Settings. Huh. I don't see why that is. I do not see what is causing that to happen. If the phone's going straight to voicemail, that sort of that really is kind of a disadvantage when you're trying to do a call and nobody can get through because the phone is going straight to voicemail. In fact, that's a serious disadvantage. But I'm going to try and fix that. If I can get that fixed. Don't pay any attention to me, folks, while I work on this. Just go on about your business. Do whatever you'd like to be doing. And while I work on the phone. Meanwhile, while I'm trying to fix the phone, you can email us at kechols47@gmail.com, and we'll get your emails. Is that the problem? Is that the problem? And I'll check emails again in just a second because we don't want to miss any. But we'd also like to get some phone calls. And in order to do that, we've got to stop the phone to voicemail. Well, this is one of those interesting things, of course, that happens when you do TV live. Surprising things will from time to time occur. All right, I think I know what I need to do, but I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can do it while we're actually on the air. All right, well, let's let that sit for a second, and because we got a couple of emails that have arrived. So I'm sorry about the phone. Those of you who are trying to call and getting voicemail, and I'm not giving up on fixing that. Still going to try to fix that. But we do have emails to read also. So let's go ahead with that. Ken, people talked a whole lot on the show about oil in the United States and how we produce oil and more oil than anybody else. I have a question. How much of the oil that we produce comes from public land, which is under control of the government, and how much it comes from private land, which the government does not control? What is the divide on that? Well, it's way more. It comes from private land than from public. About 75%, I think, if probably a little more than 75% of our oil comes from private land. Only about 25% comes from public land. And when we talk about things like federal permits and federal leases and all those kinds of things, those apply only to public land. If somebody wants to go and drill on public land, a national park land, or any kind of public land, then they have to get a lease from the federal government and get a permit from the federal government. If they want to go drill on private land, you don't have to have any of that federal government involvement. On private land, you just negotiate with the owner of the land and you draw up a contract with the landowner and decide how much you will pay and all those kinds of things that normally are parts of contracts. So obviously it's a whole lot simpler to recover oil from under private land than from under public land. And that's one reason why the overwhelming majority of our oil comes from private land. A lot of it in the Dakotas, a whole lot of it in Texas, and some in New Mexico and Oklahoma from something called the Permian Basin. I mean, that really is our Fort Knox of oil. And that's primarily private land. So that's the difference. Another difference is that if you drill on private land, you probably, depending on what you can negotiate, you probably have to pay the landowner a much higher royalty rate than you would have to pay the federal government if you drill on public land. That's one of the reasons, not the only, but one of the reasons that so many oil companies want to drill on public land, because they don't pay us, the taxpayers, nearly as much for the privilege of recovering oil on public land as they have to pay private landowners to drill on private land. But anyway, it's roughly 3 to 1, probably about 3 times as much oil comes from private land as comes from public land. And that is the split on that. I'm still, I'm multitasking here, folks, still trying to figure out how to get the phone to let you through rather than going directly to voicemail. But I haven't done that yet. So for the time being, we'll just continue with the email address, KECHOLS47@gmail.com on this edition of Star Talk, which is a live show on this Monday night, the 9th of December, unlike last week. This one says, I tried calling the on-air line. It's just ringing until it goes to voicemail, says the emailer. And the emailer suggests a couple of things that I have already done and did not work. What I need to do is something other than what I have done already. So I'm probably not going to be able to do it as I sit here and do the show, since we don't have commercial breaks or anything similar to that. I don't get much of an opportunity to correct an issue like this one. That doesn't mean I stop trying to figure it out. But yes, what the emailer suggested was an excellent idea, which is why I already did it. But it was not the solution to the problem. Question, of course, is the solution to the problem. And that ain't it. And that ain't it. Let's try this. All right. Let's do an email show. Our email address on the screen. If it's not, it is KECHOLS47@gmail.com. So just send in your emails and we'll make the phone work tomorrow night. because we will. So email me, kechols47@gmail.com is the email address, and we'll just apologize one more time for the phone. Ken, do you remember, says this email, do you remember in 1956? Oh, that's a long time ago. Do you remember in 1956 when the Russians launched that first satellite? And everybody was so scared and upset because the Russians have a satellite and we don't. And people were saying all kinds of things like the Russians were going to bomb us from the satellite and shoot missiles at us from the satellite and all that stuff. Do you remember that? I do remember it, emailer, but let me make one small correction to your email. I was in 1956, it was 1957. Let me get the month. It was in the fall. I think it was in October, might have been September, but I think it was October of 1957 that we woke up one morning, and I think it was a Sunday morning. I'm not sure about that. I believe it was a Sunday morning. We woke up to the news that the Russians, the Soviet Union, as it was then, had launched an Earth satellite. And we'd been hearing about satellites for years at that point. Someday we will put satellites that will orbit the Earth. But on that day in 1957, we found out that the Soviets had actually done it, and they called it Sputnik, Sputnik 1. And I remember all the conversations that were going on that you mentioned. People were wondering what they were going to do, what they could do, what kinds of evil and nefarious things they'd be able to do to us with that satellite. It turned out Sputnik wasn't too much of a threat, although those kinds of threats certainly have been developed over the years. But that day, that satellite, we didn't have to worry about that. Main thing we had to worry about, main thing that I was concerned about was, well, when are we gonna get a satellite orbiting the Earth? And it took a while. Uh, uh, Again, I'm relying on memory here, so this might not be completely right. But we at that point sort of rushed up our efforts to get a satellite launched, and we had a few things go wrong trying to get a satellite in the air. We had a couple of pretty impressive failures trying to get our satellite up, but we made it. A few months later, we got one going, and as they say, the space race was on. But yeah, you're right. That day, that first day when we first heard that Russia had launched a satellite, uh, that was a kind of a scary day because rumors were rampant about what they might do with that satellite. All those rumors at that time turned out to be unfounded, thank the Lord. But it was, yeah, it was kind of scary. Ken, what have they found out about the guy that shot that insurance executive in New York? I heard that they have arrested somebody. They have somebody in custody. I don't know how much they have found out. Um, One thing I read is that they suspect the man had, and I don't have the story in front of me, so I might not get this exactly right. The man had a very involved medical procedure. I think it was a spinal operation of some sort. And they don't know any of this for sure, but they're wondering if he was motivated by some experience, something that happened or didn't happen in relation to that. But they don't know very much, or they're not saying very much. They probably know more than they say. But all I know is he is a person of interest, and they have found evidence that they are satisfied links him to the shooting. And as far as his medical history, that's purely speculation as to whether that had any involvement in it or not. So that's as much as I know about that, but I expect more will be coming out pretty quickly over the next few days. Um, this emailer says, "Hello, Ken. This is Pretty Man." Well, that's all we need on a night when things are not going quite the way we want. All we need is an email, an email from Pretty Man to make everything better. Pretty Man says, I am going to take the lead." He says, "I'm going to take the lead to be the best in the NASCAR contest in the next year. I am taking the number 12 for Daytona." Well, it's a little bit early, Pretty Man, to start making our predictions for Daytona. Why don't we hold that? Why don't you just sit on that for the time being, and call me back? Call me back in about 3 months, when we'll be we'll be writing down the picks for Daytona. I'll tell you what, just so you don't get upset and send me another email, and I certainly don't want another email from you. I'm going to go ahead and write down that 12 right now. I'm not encouraging other people to do this, but because this is Pretty Man, and because he can be such a nuisance if things don't go exactly his way, I'm going to go ahead and write down that 12. The Pretty Man has 12 for the Daytona 500. Um, so that's the first pick of 2025. Pretty Man has the 12, and thank you, Pretty Man, for doing what you always do, and doing the least appropriate thing at the at the most inappropriate time. We know we can count on you for that. This one says, "One more try, LOL. I can't tell if it's something you know the issue already because you replaced your hard drive." Oh, I'm reading a mail. Yes, this is something you already know how to do. This is, it's something that's occurring. It is something. This is Martinsville wondering about the phone and asking me a couple of questions. Martinsville, the answer to your question is yes, I do know. Within reason, I do know what needs to be done, but it's something I'm not going to be able to do in current circumstances. So thank you for your suggestions, but I know the problem, um, and I will correct the problem after after we're no longer on the air. But I'm not going to be able to do it right now, unfortunately. So we won't be able to take any calls tonight. However, we will keep the emails going. Hey, Ken, emailer says there are currently 69 days until now. No, see, Pretty Man, see what you've started. There are currently 69 days until the 2025 Daytona 500, which will take place on February 16th, 2023, when the green flag waves in Daytona Beach, Florida. It will represent the 67th running of the great American race. Put me down for number, okay, put me down for number blankety blankety blank. What say you, Ken? I'm not going to make my prediction yet. Um, a lot of stuff could happen. 69 days. Thank you for giving me the precise count on how many days there are. I suggested that Pretty Man wait 3 months. 3 months would be maybe a little too long to wait. Um, so, so Pretty Man, I'm taking Pretty Man's number, the 12. I'm putting that in the great book right now, so that Pretty Man does not have to contact me again. But for the rest of you, the Daytona 500 runs 69 days from today. And who do I predict? I don't know. Many things can happen between now um, and February 16th. Um, Many things that could give me a greater and more meaningful insights into my prediction. They probably won't give me any more meaningful insight, but you never know, they might. So I'm going to wait and see if that will happen. So I'm going to hold my prediction probably until the week of the Daytona, the 67th running of the great American race. But it's kind of fun to talk about it, isn't it? To anticipate that the season is only 69 days away. And thanks, emailer, for that. I appreciate it. This one says, Ken, I remember when the Russians launched Sputnik, and I think you're right. I believe it was on a Sunday morning, because I think, and my memory might not be right, but I think I heard about it on my way to church on that Sunday morning. And everybody at church was talking about it and talking about praying for the nation to protect us from whatever it was that the Russians had orbiting the Earth. It was a whole big thing back then, and we made it into something way more dangerous than it was then. Of course, who knows how dangerous those things are now? Yeah. Who knows indeed? Who knows indeed? Ken, tell me point blank, what happened to the 20 million missing votes? 20 million fewer votes cast in the presidential election in 2024 than in 2020. 20 million votes just disappeared. You tell me what happened to them. Emailer, that of course was a topic of conversation, mostly while the votes were still being counted. It takes a while to count 150, 55, 56 million votes. There are not 20 million votes missing. The reason it looked that way is because people were comparing the complete count from 2020, which was 156 million votes in 2020, to really a partial count in 2024, in the days after the election, hadn't counted all the votes yet. So it looked like there were 20 million fewer votes this year than had been the case in 2020. But it's not the case. Since then, they've finished counting. And it's just that turnout was lower. People, for whatever reasons, probably because they're not particularly excited about a candidate they might have wanted to support, not as many people voted. Turnout goes up and down. It's a fact of life. But there were no 20 million missing votes. There are 4 million missing votes, and it can easily be seen if you look at the turnout numbers all across the nation. Just that many fewer people voted this year. There's a lot of people just never got engaged in this one, and different people have different reasons for that. And it's too bad that people don't get engaged in a presidential election, but that's how it went. KECHOLS47@gmail.com, the email address. The phone's not going to work tonight. The phone will work tomorrow night. So we'll have that then. I can't only get back to that question about the oil. So if most of the oil is on private land, does that mean that most of the oil does not have to have a federal permit? Well, yeah, emailer, that's what it means. Most of the oil is recovered in areas that do not require a federal permit because it's not federal land, it's private land. The Permian Basin, by the way, has about there are different estimates, has about another 40 to 50 years of oil in it at our present recovery rate. About another 40 to 50 years of oil in it. If for some or whatever reason we start taking less oil out of the Permian Basin, it'll last longer. If we should start taking more out of the Permian Basin, then obviously it wouldn't last as long. It doesn't take a mathematical genius to figure that part out. But as it stands right now, about another 40 to 50 years of oil in that Permian Basin. And then then we'll be out of oil in the Permian Basin. But many of us won't live long enough to see that. And also, and who knows, uh, because there are methods now of recovering oil which are widely used in the Permian Basin, things like horizontal drilling and fracking and stuff like that, that we didn't even know about 20 years ago. Because if you think back 20 or so years ago, we were kind of thinking that the Permian Basin was already running out of oil, and it was running out of oil that we could get with the technology of the time. But of course, technology changed and new things came along, and that made a lot more of the oil accessible. So with current technology, we have 40 to 50 years of worth of oil in there. Um, we might have new technology at some point and be able to recover more from there. Of course, all that is in the realm of science and technology and oil exploration and all those complicated things that I just don't know very much about. But I guess the bottom line is you never know what kinds of techniques we might come up with to make that oil last longer or to get more of it. Ken, I'm not going to be like Pretty Man in any way. I encourage you not to be like Pretty Man in any way. So I'm not going to try to make a pick for the Daytona 500 right now. Um, but I will ask you this question. Is NASCAR going to make any major changes for the next season to change the quality of racing? And in particular, in my mind, to improve the quality of the tires. Because how many races did we have this past year where the tires were not too good and it really was the quality of the tires instead of the quality of the car and driver that decided the races? What will NASCAR do about that? I don't know, emailer. I think that's for anybody who follows the sport. I think that's a very important and pertinent question because we did have a couple of tough, bad tire days in the 2024 season, and I think NASCAR probably would like to keep that kind of thing to a minimum. As for any specific actions that NASCAR might take, or any specific rules changes, or any specific anything that they might do to change that. I don't know. I haven't heard of anything they're going to do. I haven't even heard of if NASCAR is thinking about tire issues right now, although I suspect that they probably are. But stay tuned during the next 69 days to see what NASCAR might or might not do about changing tires and getting a different aspect on the tires and trying to avoid those days when we see tires disintegrating and cars bouncing off the wall through no fault of the driver. We really don't need to see a lot more than that. Ken, what is walking pneumonia? I've heard about walking pneumonia all my life, and now I even hear that there's a mini epidemic of walking pneumonia in North Carolina. Can you explain to me what walking pneumonia is? No, I cannot explain what walking pneumonia is. Uh, I take it to be, and I've heard about it forever, just like you. I have always taken it to be something that behaves sort of like pneumonia, but doesn't make you sick enough that you have to go to bed with it. I guess it's just a mild form of pneumonia, but I really can't give you any more of an explanation than that. Maybe I can look it up. Of course, to do that, you have to know how to spell pneumonia. I think I can. All right. Well, it says no. Well, couldn't be that easy. No, if somebody knows, I'm sure we have any number of licensed, distinguished physicians who watch this show because of the intelligent conversation that it presents. So one of you people call us up and tell it. Well, no, you can't call us up because the phone don't work. One of you people call us up tomorrow night and tell us exactly what walking pneumonia is, because I simply cannot answer that question. I'd kind of like to know the answer, to tell you the truth. Um, hey, Ken, I agree NASCAR needs to do something about the tires, because I don't like anything less than I like seeing a race decided by tires instead of decided by cars and drivers. So I have not heard anything either about what they might do about the tires, but I sure hope they do something, because this past season, I think it was 2 races, and it might have been 3 races, that were affected far too much by the tires, and we don't need to see any more of that. So do something, NASCAR, says the emailer. Ken, what is the deal now? What is the deal now with that Supreme Court race in North Carolina, where somebody's ahead by 700 votes, but they won't declare a winner? What is going on? Politics is going on. The incumbent Justice Riggs has a 764 vote lead. This is with all the votes counted um, and recounted. 764 votes. So she wins. What? Wait, not so fast. The Republicans are trying. The Republicans have gone to court. They're trying to throw out 60,000 votes, somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000 votes, uh, because they say that these 60,000 votes could be fraudulent, because they are mail-in votes that do not contain a social security number or a driver's license number to authenticate them. Um, there's a law passed in North Carolina in 2004, long time ago, 20 years ago, that requires either a social security number or a driver's license number, as I understand it, be written on those ballots. But nobody, it appears nobody ever told the voters. They passed the law in 2004, and then they put out this voting instruction form, which I don't remember specifically. It's a long time ago. But based on what I read, they put out a set of voter instructions that did not tell the voters that they had to put a social security number or a driver's license number on the ballot. So for the last 20 years, we've been having elections in North Carolina where some people were voting by mail, by absentee, without putting that information on there because nobody knew it was supposed to be on there. Well, I won't say nobody knew, but by and large, people didn't know it was supposed to be on there because it wasn't in the instructions. And that kind of thing causes all sorts of, of complications when it comes to light. So the last 20 years of elections have been conducted under those circumstances without that information being, well, on some of them, but there have been some votes for the last 20 years where that wasn't on there, when people didn't know they were supposed to put it on there. And the issue never came up until now, when we have this. Well, no, that's not true. It came up in another Supreme Court race, but let's not muddy the waters with that. The answer to your question is they're arguing now over that, and whether that ought to disqualify 60,000 ballots. So there's a federal lawsuit. Well, first of all, it's gone to the State Board of Elections, and the State Board of Elections will make a decision one way or the other. And I expect whatever decision the State Board of Elections will make, will then be challenged in court by whichever side is dissatisfied with whatever decision the State Board of Elections makes. So that's one thing. It's at the State Board of Elections now, and eventually it'll go to court on the state level. Meanwhile, there is a federal law that prohibits states from throwing out a vote simply because the ballot does not have a social security number written on the ballot. The federal law says if the voter is obviously a qualified voter, then no, you cannot take that person's vote away from them because they didn't write their social security number on the ballot. So what would happen if that law come into play and override the North Carolina law, the state law, if the state courts should throw out the ballots? Well, maybe it would, and maybe it wouldn't. Of course, the Constitution says federal law always overrides state law, but there are no sure things in politics. So that's what's going on with that right now. It's not over yet, and I honestly I don't think we know when it really will be over, because the State Board of Elections has to deal with it, and then the dissatisfied side will undoubtedly sue, and who knows how long that'll take. But someday, one of these days, someday, some way, we will know who won that election. But not today, and I'm pretty sure not tomorrow. So that's the answer to that question. And then there's this one, which says, no, I'm not reading that one. Even on a night when we're desperate for emails, I'm not reading that one. But we'll read this one. Ken, do you know anything about Albert Einstein? A little bit. Somebody told me he made terrible grades in school. Is that true? Was Einstein a bad student? Well, I haven't seen his report cards. I think he was not a great student based on what I know about Einstein. And let me tell you right up front, I have not researched this question. But my understanding is he was not really not an outstanding student in high school, or what the analog for high school was where he grew up. He made more or less average grades, I think, in high school. He clearly was not an average intellect, and he had better than average abilities. But sometimes in school, better than average ability does not translate into better than average grades for a whole host of reasons. Anyway, the answer to your question was no, he was not celebrated as a great and brilliant student in high school. He was just kind of middle of the pack student-wise in high school. He did better later on. You might be aware of some of the things he did after high school. He rallied after high school, and did some pretty smart stuff. But in high school, he was just kind of, yeah. And that is all the time we have for Star Talk tonight. I'm going to fix the phone so it'll be ready to go tomorrow night. It will. As far as tonight, at least we got a live show done, so that's some accomplishment. We're on the air, really, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. I hope you'll join us next time. Thanks for watching. I'm Ken Echols.